Hello everyone, Wade from High Tech Legion here, and we're going to be showing you the software for the ASUS RT-N66U wireless N router. When you first set up the router and you plug it into your computer and your internet connection or WAN connection, it'll actually intercept your page when you first open up the internet, so that it can do its initial setup. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're at the check connection point. If we click next, we'll go through the quick internet setup. It does force you to set a new password on the router. The default is admin, though I definitely suggest you putting in something different. Then we would click next. It'll detect our connection type. I'm using DSL, and it correctly detected that it's PPoE DSL. If we click next, we can set that up and put in the username. Once the username and password are entered for the DSL connection, we'll click next, and it should set up our wireless connection and connect us to the internet. At any point, you can click this home button to skip the quick setup and go into the more advanced setup, though this doesn't take very long, so it's worth it. Next, it asks us to set our network name or SSID. Defaults to ASUS and ASUS 5G, obviously. This checkbox here allows us to actually copy the settings so they're exactly the same. I'm going to enter High Tech Legion. And I'm going to copy the settings and then click Apply. It's good to use a mixed set of characters and numbers for your password to make it harder to break into the network. It does default to WPA2, which is the current standard, which is wonderful. You can see our settings here, and we are connected to the internet. And then click Finish to get to our main screen. On the main screen is actually the network map. That's this tab here. This is all tabbed browsing for the different sections. And we have our internet status here with our IP address and our system status for our wireless, which we can change right here on the front page. The LAN IP is also here, which is the address that you would use to access the router. You can also type in, as you can see here, asusnetwork.net. It'll also bring you into the router. Here we've got our security level, and then if we click this bubble, it'll actually show us the clients on the right. And these are our two USB ports, which could be used for either storage or printers. And if we click on that, we'll get the information based on that, as well as the ability to remove the disk or set up the media server and AIdisk. If we move on to the next tab here, for guest networks, you have the ability to enable up to 3 guest networks for each wireless spectrum, the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum. So you would click the Enable button if you want to use this feature. It goes through a little process to set up the form to enter. Right now it's open. You would click on the text there to change the name. So we're going to do High Tech Legion Guest, and I wouldn't leave this open unless you have a reason for wanting a network that anybody can get onto, change this to WPA to personal and set a key. You also have the ability to set access times or leave it limitless, and this access internet enable disable is what will allow people connecting to this to actually access the internet from the network. By default, it's disabled. Now you can see we're back on the main screen, and we can see that we have a network under the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum named High-Tech Legion Guest with security, the network key, it's open, wide open, and internet access is off right now. Under Traffic Manager, you can turn on Quality of Service, or QoS. The reason to use QoS is if you have very limited bandwidth. If you don't have limited bandwidth or a ton of users using it, it's best to leave it off because it will actually slow down your internet connection, trying to reserve bandwidth for other applications. On this tab we have the parental control that are built into the router. What this allows you to do is set up times that certain clients or computers are allowed to access the internet. The first thing you need to do is turn it on by toggling this switch right here. ASUS also has a tutorial video that you can click on and open here. What you would do is you would select the client name, so it gives you the IP address as well as the name. Click Add. It shows you what's been added, Stealth, the client's MAC address. You can enable or disable it by checking the box here. And under Time Management, you can set a schedule. So on Sunday, we can access it all day long, and on Saturday, we can access it all day long. But on Monday, maybe we only want them to be able to access it from 3 to 6, etc., all the way through the middle of the week. So we set up that schedule and click OK, and then now from those times, those are the only times that Stealth will be able to access the internet. And click Apply just to confirm that the settings get put into memory. Under USB application, we actually have lots of different sections here. We have the AIdisk, which, as they say, allows you to share files from a USB disk plugged into one of the USB ports on the back of the router over the internet. Under Server Center, you can set up a media center or an iTunes server, FTP server, or file access through Samba, or typical, which is typical file access over the network. Network print server can be used with a printer, and 3G, 4G setup could be used if you have a 3G, 4G USB cellular device from your phone company, and you can go in here and set up all those settings so that the router could fall back to that internet connection if you lose connection through your main network. Under network printing, you have the ability to set up printing through two different methods. Most people are going to want to use the ASUS Easy Printer Sharing feature. You do have to download a program for that to work. The LPR protocol is much more complicated to set up. Under Service Center here, you can see we have 4 tabs, one for each system: a DLNA media server, iTunes server, and if you click in this box, you can set the directory that you want to be the media server directory. So you would put files like photos and videos and music in there. So if you have other devices like a PlayStation 3, they'd be able to access that drive that's plugged into your router, and you'd be able to play the videos and videos, music, photos, etc. through those devices that are hooked into the biggest screen in the house. Under Network Places Samba, you can disable the share with an account name, or refresh the page. You can set permissions for each directory that's on the volume. RW is read-write, R is read permissions, and no means that they don't have any permission to that folder. The plus button will allow you to add a new folder. Minus button will delete a folder, and you can also rename them. Once the share is enabled with account, you can add accounts here. So if we enable this, the default is the router login, admin, and then whatever you set for your password. You can do a plus and say put in family and a password of family. So once that's in there, you can then give that account permissions to certain folders that can be used. So right now, by default, this account that I just created has no permissions to any of the folders. So I'm going to give it permission to the media folder as well as a test folder that are on that hard drive. Now that's set up so that you should be able to access it through the network by IP address. So if we do open up a run window, we do / 192.168.1.1, which is the router's IP address. And there we go. These are our folders. It does prompt us for a password because we have that enabled. And we're into the folders. We can copy things here or copy things from it. Under FTP share, you can also set permissions for it, because what this allows you to do is access the drive through the internet over FTP. Miscellaneous settings, maximum users, the name of the device, the work group. This should be the same as whatever work group your computer is. Work group is default. Character set for the FTP server, UTF-8 is default. That should be left alone. Under advanced settings for wireless, we can click on that and we get all of our wireless settings. You would just pick the drop down box to change between the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band. Each network has its own settings. If you're changing the settings, you do need to click apply before you move over to the next network, otherwise it will lose those settings. You've got your SSID or network name. Hide SSID, yes or no. If it's set to yes, the SSID will not show up and you'll need to type that in. However, it's not very effective for security, so personally I wouldn't bother with it. It just causes more headaches having to type it in, and if you forget what it is, you'll have a problem there. Under wireless mode, you can set it to N only. If all your devices are N compliant, then you would use that and you'll get a higher speed connection. Or legacy. Legacy will allow it to connect to N devices, B devices, and G devices, all to connect to the system. The control channel is the wireless channel that it's set to. Most people are going to want to leave this to auto. That way if interference changes, the router will actually change the channel and you'll get the best connection. Same thing here, the channel bandwidth. I would leave this to the 20 and 40 megahertz to let the software on the router decide what to set it to for the optimal connection. Extension channel, leave that to auto, and the authentication method defaults to the best security available right now, WPA2 Personal and AES. Right here is your network password. So if you forget your network password, but you can log into the router from a hardwired machine, you can log in and get the password that way without having to reset the whole router to factory defaults. Under WPS, WPS is called Wi-Fi protected setup. There's a little button on the back of the router that enables WPS so that you can just enter a PIN code into a system that supports WPS, and instead of having to remember a long password. However, WPS has some inherent security flaws, so personally I would recommend that you shut this off completely and just remember the WPA2 password. You can use something that's fairly easy to remember.
Some more advanced settings are port triggering and port forwarding under the WAN section. Port triggering allows you to temporarily open ports to allow data through to a LAN device on the inside of the network. Port forwarding similarly does the same thing, but you set a specific port for data to be forwarded from to a specific device on the network. Some more other advanced settings is the NAT pass-through, which allows you to change some settings which are specifically related to the VPN feature of the router. If you leave these to enable, then you'll be able to use the VPN pass-through on it. If you are not going to be using the VPN, you should be able to set these to disabled by without too much issue. But if you're not sure, definitely leave them to enabled, and you won't have any issues caused by leaving them at their defaults. Under VPN server, you have your basic configuration for the VPN. The virtual private network allows you to connect into your system at home to be able to use the internet and also access the files. To be able to access files connected to the systems, you need to enable the network mode for Samba support and also enable the PPTP server for the VPN to work properly. Under username and password, you would enter the login credentials that you want to use to access the VPN and click the add button and then apply to enable the VPN settings. Under the VPN server details, we can set the different types of broadcast support, and you can also change the authentication method and the encryption that's available to be used. DNS servers and Win servers can be set to not connect to automatically, and they default to yes, being able to connect to them. You'll also notice that the client IP range can be set or is set to a different range than the internal LAN with 10.2 at the end instead of a 1 dot and a number. The default settings for the firewall are on. It also has DOS protection that can be turned on if you desire. And under the URL filter, you can put in a URL that you do not want people to be able to access on your network. For the example they use is XXX, and if you put that into the URL filter, then anything with the XXX in the URL will not be able to be accessed. You also have a network services filter available where you can block certain types of network traffic from being able to be processed. On the administration tab, you can change the mode from wireless router to access point mode, and in access point mode, all it will provide is wireless access to other systems on the network, and you will need another router or internet connection, something providing the internet connection for this to work. I hope you enjoyed the video overview of the RT-N66U router from ASUS. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages, and check out the full review as well as others at www.hightechlegion.com.